Ever stop and think how many toxic 1980s foods we ate that are now forbidden? These foods lined grocery shelves and filled lunchboxes as though nothing could be wrong. So what hidden dangers were quietly making their way into our bodies before anyone warned us? In the 1980s, alar-treated red apples were considered the pinnacle of perfect produce, shiny and beautiful in ways that seemed almost too good to be natural. Grocery stores stacked them in gleaming pyramids, and parents packed them proudly into lunchboxes, believing they were giving their children something wholesome and good. The chemical alar helped apples stay firm, develop that deep red color, and resist bruising during long truck rides across the country. Farmers loved it because it extended shelf life, and stores loved it because fruit looked irresistible under fluorescent lights. But when alar broke down during cooking or processing, it released a compound called UDMH, which researchers connected to cancer risks. Apple juice, applesauce, and baked goods made from treated fruit carried this invisible threat into kitchens everywhere. When findings became public, families threw out Apple products and demanded answers. Regulators banned alar from food production, but the damage to trust was done. It remains one of the starkest examples of how something sold as healthy can quietly carry dangers nobody imagined. Sulfite-preserved restaurant salad bars were the crown jewels of casual dining in the 1980s. Those long, gleaming counters overflowing with crisp lettuce, vegetables, and toppings that seemed impossibly fresh. Families lined up with plates in hand, thrilled by endless variety and the illusion of healthy eating. What diners did not realize was that many restaurants sprayed produce with sulfite solutions to keep everything looking vibrant long past its natural shelf life. The chemicals stopped browning and allowed vegetables to sit under heat lamps for hours without wilting. It seemed like a miracle of food science. But sulfites triggered severe reactions in certain people, especially those with asthma, causing breathing difficulties and, in tragic cases, death. Reports of allergic emergencies mounted until regulators could no longer ignore the pattern. The FDA banned sulfite sprays on fresh fruits and vegetables served raw, forcing restaurants to rethink salad bar practices entirely. That gleaming buffet of the past carries a shadow most people never knew existed, a reminder that freshness can sometimes be a dangerous illusion. Red dye number 3 colored the candies, cereals, and desserts of the 1980s in shades of bright cherry and festive pink that children adored without hesitation. It made maraschino cherries glow atop ice cream sundaes, turned fruit snacks into jewel-toned treats, and gave holiday cookies their signature festive look. Parents bought these products without a second thought, assuming anything sold on grocery shelves must be safe. But researchers discovered something troubling when laboratory studies connected the dye to thyroid tumors in animals, raising alarm about what it might do inside human bodies. The FDA banned red dye number 3 from cosmetics, yet the additive lingered in certain foods under older approvals that seemed impossible to untangle. Families who remembered eating handfuls of those bright red candies began questioning what else slipped past safety checks. The controversy sparked lasting debates about artificial colors in the food supply. Looking back, those vivid reds and pinks carry a complicated legacy, a symbol of an era when color mattered more than caution and danger hid behind cheerful packaging. Raw milk sold openly in grocery stores felt like a wholesome throwback during the 1980s, something that connected modern families to simpler dairy traditions their grandparents knew. Cartons sat beside pasteurized options, marketed as more natural, more nutritious, and closer to the way milk was meant to be consumed. Health enthusiasts praised its enzymes and unprocessed purity, believing heat treatment destroyed things that made milk beneficial. Families poured it over cereal, gave it to children, and used it in recipes without imagining any threat lurking inside. But raw milk carried bacteria that pasteurization was designed to destroy, including Salmonella, E. coli, and Listeria, organisms capable of causing severe illness or death. Outbreaks linked to unpasteurized dairy mounted as families fell sick, some suffering permanent damage while others did not survive. State after state began banning retail sales, and federal regulators prohibited raw milk from crossing state lines. The drink that symbolized natural living became a public health battleground. Today, it remains illegal in most places, a reminder that tradition and safety do not always walk together. Des-treated beef and veal arrived on dinner tables across the country during the 1980s without anyone suspecting the danger hidden inside every tender bite. Diethylstilbestrol was a synthetic hormone implanted in cattle to accelerate growth, helping animals bulk up faster and reach market weight with less feed. Ranchers loved the efficiency, and consumers enjoyed lower prices without questioning how those savings were achieved. Families grilled steaks, roasted roasts, and served veal cutlets, believing they were providing wholesome protein. But DES had a horrifying history that should have raised alarms, because the same hormone given to pregnant women to prevent miscarriage caused devastating cancers in their children decades later. When researchers connected DES residues in meat to similar risks, shockwaves hit the agricultural industry. Regulators banned the hormone from livestock production, but damage to public confidence was immense. People looked at their freezers filled with beef and wondered what they had already consumed. It remains one of the clearest examples of how shortcuts in food production can carry consequences lasting for generations. Ethylene dibromide fumigated flour sat in pantries and bakery stockrooms across the country during the 1980s, quietly contaminating bread, cakes, cookies, and pastries that families trusted as perfectly safe. The chemical was used to fumigate stored grain, killing insects and preventing infestations that could ruin entire harvests. Farmers and processors saw it as essential protection, a modern solution to ancient problems of spoilage and pest damage. Nobody thought twice about what happened when fumigated grains were milled into flour and shipped to grocery stores. But ethylene dibromide did not simply vanish during processing. Residues remained in finished products, and researchers discovered the chemical was a confirmed carcinogen capable of causing serious harm with repeated exposure. When the EPA banned the fumigant, the announcement sent ripples through the entire grain industry. Bakers, millers, and consumers questioned everything on their shelves. It was a jarring reminder that contamination can travel invisibly from field to fork, and that even bread, the most basic food, could carry dangers nobody saw coming. Lead-soldered canned foods were pantry staples throughout the 1980s, stacked in neat rows of soups, vegetables, fruits, and baby foods that families relied on for convenience. The seams of those cans were sealed with lead solder, a technique standard in manufacturing for decades. Nobody questioned it because canned food represented safety, preservation, and modern efficiency. Parents heated these products for quick dinners, packed them in lunches, and spooned them into the mouths of infants without any hesitation. But lead does not stay locked in metal. It leaches slowly into food inside, especially when contents are acidic, like tomatoes or citrus. Children absorb this heavy metal with every bite, accumulating toxins that damage developing brains and nervous systems. When scientists connected widespread lead exposure to canned food consumption, evidence was damning. Federal regulations eventually banned lead solder in food packaging, but countless families had already consumed years of contaminated meals. Looking back, it is chilling to realize that cans meant to nourish instead quietly poisoned an entire generation. Sodium cyclamate. Sweetened drinks were everywhere in the 1980s, filling refrigerators and vending machines with diet sodas that promised guilt-free refreshment. The artificial sweetener tasted remarkably close to sugar, lacked the bitter aftertaste of alternatives, and helped calorie-conscious consumers enjoy drinks without weight gain associated with regular soda. Families stocked cases of these beverages, and dieters relied on them as essential tools in weight management. The sweeteners seemed like a perfect solution to growing concerns about sugar and obesity. But cyclamate had already been banned in the United States back in 1969 after studies linked it to bladder cancer in laboratory animals. Despite ongoing debates about those findings, the ban remained firmly in place. Many consumers had no idea they were consuming something prohibited when they purchased imported products or traveled abroad. The controversy highlighted how differently nations approached food safety. Today, cyclamate remains forbidden in the United States, a quiet reminder that what tastes sweet can sometimes carry bitter consequences. Brominated vegetable oil lurked inside the citrus-flavored sodas and fruit drinks of the 1980s, keeping bright colors evenly distributed instead of floating to the top like an oily film. The additive was originally developed as a flame retardant, a detail that seems almost impossible to believe given how casually it appeared in beverages marketed to children and families. Manufacturers valued it for keeping drinks looking consistent and appealing on store shelves. Kids guzzled orange sodas, lemon-lime concoctions, and fruity punches without any idea that a chemical designed to stop fires swirled through every sip. But bromine accumulates in the body, building up in fatty tissues and potentially causing neurological harm with prolonged exposure. When researchers raised alarms about long-term effects, regulators around the world took notice. Many countries banned brominated vegetable oil entirely, and major beverage companies eventually reformulated products under public pressure. The additive that once seemed like harmless convenience became one of the strangest examples of industrial chemicals finding their way into the food supply. Chlordane-contaminated poultry reached dinner tables across the country during the 1980s after the powerful pesticide worked its way through the food chain in ways nobody anticipated. Farmers used chlordane to control termites around barns, coops, and feed storage areas, believing the chemical stayed where it was applied. But chlordane was persistent, clinging to soil, drifting into water supplies, and accumulating in the fat of animals that consumed contaminated feed. Chickens absorbed it steadily, storing the pesticide in their tissues until concentrations alarmed health officials. Families roasted these birds for Sunday dinners, fried drumsticks for picnics, and served chicken salad at gatherings without suspecting anything wrong. When testing revealed widespread contamination, scandal rocked the poultry industry. Regulators banned chlordane from agricultural use, but trust in commercially raised chicken was shattered. It was a stark lesson in how chemicals meant for one purpose can travel invisibly through ecosystems, ending up exactly where they were never supposed to be, on the plates of unsuspecting families. Nitrite-cured meats without safety limits filled deli counters and refrigerators throughout the 1980s, from sliced ham and bacon to hot dogs and bologna that children devoured without question. The preservatives kept meat looking pink and appetizing while preventing bacterial growth that could cause food poisoning. Families packed sandwiches for school lunches, served platters at gatherings, and fried bacon every weekend morning, believing they were enjoying simple, satisfying food. The smell alone made mouths water and kitchens feel like home. But nitrites react with proteins during cooking and digestion to form nitrosamines, compounds that researchers link to stomach cancer and other diseases. Studies showed that heavy consumption of processed meats carried real health consequences, especially for children whose smaller bodies absorbed higher relative doses. Regulators eventually imposed strict limits on nitrite levels and required manufacturers to add compounds that inhibit nitrosamine formation. The beloved deli meats of the past now carry warning labels. It is unsettling to realize that sandwiches packed with love once carried risks nobody thought to mention. Aflatoxin-contaminated peanut butter sat in kitchen cabinets across the country during the 1980s, spreading invisibly onto sandwiches that children ate day after day. Aflatoxins are toxic compounds produced by mold that grows on peanuts, corn, and other crops, especially when storage conditions allow humidity to build. Back then, testing protocols were inconsistent, and contaminated batches slipped through quality control systems that had not yet caught up with the danger. Parents trusted peanut butter as wholesome protein, a lunchbox staple that kids loved and adults considered nutritious. Nobody examined jars for signs of contamination or questioned whether something so ordinary could carry real harm. But aflatoxins are among the most potent naturally occurring carcinogens known to science, capable of causing liver damage and cancer with repeated exposure. When outbreaks traced back to contaminated peanut products, regulators implemented strict testing requirements that transformed the industry. Today, peanut butter undergoes rigorous screening before reaching shelves. Those old jars represent an era when trust in familiar foods outweighed the caution we now know was always necessary. Potassium bromate bread rose high and golden in bakeries and home ovens throughout the 1980s, its perfect texture owing much to a chemical additive that made dough stronger and more elastic. Bakers loved how Bro-Mate improved rise, created finer crumb structure, and produced loaves that looked professionally crafted even from amateur kitchens. The additive became standard in commercial bread production, appearing in everything from sandwich loaves to hamburger buns without any indication on labels that consumers might want to know. Families ate this bread daily, trusting that anything sold so widely must be perfectly safe. But laboratory studies eventually connected potassium bromate to cancer in animals, raising serious questions about what it might do inside human bodies over years of consumption. Many countries banned the additive entirely, though it remained legal in the United States under the assumption that proper baking destroyed most of the chemical. The debate continues today, with many bakers choosing bromate-free recipes to avoid even theoretical risk. That perfect golden crust carries a complicated history few people ever learned. Mercury-laden swordfish and tuna were prized catches on dinner tables throughout the 1980s, served as elegant steaks at restaurants and sliced into sandwiches for everyday lunches. These large, predatory fish were celebrated for their firm texture, rich flavor, and reputation as healthy protein sources loaded with omega fatty acids. Families ordered them proudly at seafood counters, grilled them at backyard barbecues, and packed tuna salad into lunchboxes without any hesitation. The ocean seemed like an endless source of pure, natural food, untouched by the contamination problems plaguing land-based agriculture. But mercury accumulates in fish that eat smaller fish, concentrating as it moves up the food chain until top predators carry levels dangerous to human health. Pregnant women, children, and frequent consumers were especially vulnerable to neurological damage that could take years to manifest. When testing revealed how contaminated these popular fish had become, regulators issued consumption advisories that shocked families who thought they were eating healthy. Today, strict warnings limit how often these fish should appear on anyone's plate. Hexachlorobenzene, treated grain products, made their way into bread, cereal, and pasta throughout the 1980s after the fungicide was used to protect wheat and other crops from disease during storage. Farmers valued its effectiveness against seed-borne infections that could devastate entire harvests, and processors assumed residues would be negligible by the time grains reached consumers. Families ate these products daily, building meals around bread, pasta, and breakfast cereals without any awareness of what chemicals might linger inside. The fungicide seemed like a necessary tool in modern agriculture, protecting the food supply from threats that had plagued farmers for generations. But hexachlorobenzene proved far more persistent and dangerous than anyone initially believed. Mass poisoning events in other countries had already demonstrated its devastating effects on human health, causing liver damage, skin lesions, and neurological problems. When regulators finally connected these risks to agricultural use, the chemical was banned globally. The grains that once seemed like simple staples carried contamination that took decades to fully understand and eliminate from the food chain. Saccharin products with cancer warnings lined grocery shelves throughout the 1980s, those little pink packets in diet sodas carrying labels that would alarm any careful reader. The artificial sweetener had been linked to bladder cancer in laboratory animals, and regulators required manufacturers to print warnings directly on packaging. Yet consumers kept buying, kept sweetening their coffee, kept choosing diet drinks despite the ominous text staring back at them from every label. The desire for calorie-free sweetness outweighed the fear that warning labels were meant to inspire. People rationalized that the studies involved unrealistic doses, that humans were different from laboratory rats, that surely something so widely available could not be truly dangerous. Families used saccharin daily, stirring it into beverages and sprinkling it over cereal without fully absorbing what those warnings meant. Later research eventually led regulators to remove the warning requirement, though debates about artificial sweetener safety continue today. Those pink packets represent an era when consumers knowingly accepted labeled risks in exchange for the sweetness they craved. Diethylstilbestrol chicken reached dinner tables across the country during the 1980s, the synthetic hormone implanted in poultry to accelerate growth and increase profits for producers. Farmers embraced the technology because it meant birds reached market weight faster, reducing feed costs and speeding up production cycles. Consumers benefited from lower prices without questioning what made chicken so affordable and abundant. Families roasted whole birds for Sunday dinners, fried drumsticks for weeknight meals, and served chicken at nearly every gathering. The meat seemed wholesome and natural, a lean protein that health-conscious eaters preferred over red meat. But DES had already been connected to devastating health effects in humans, causing cancer and reproductive problems in children whose mothers took the hormone during pregnancy. When researchers found residues in poultry, the implications were deeply troubling. Regulators banned hormone implants in chicken production, though the damage to public trust was significant. The affordable chicken that families had eaten for years suddenly seemed far less innocent than anyone had imagined. Heptachlor contaminated dairy products appeared in refrigerators across the country during the 1980s, after the banned pesticide worked its way into milk supplies through contaminated cattle feed. The chemical had been used to control soil insects and termites before regulators recognized its persistence in the environment and its tendency to accumulate in fatty tissues. Dairy farmers unknowingly fed their cows grain treated with heptachlor residues, and the pesticide concentrated in milk fat that families poured over cereal, mixed into recipes, and gave to growing children. Nobody suspected that something as pure and wholesome as milk could carry industrial contamination. When testing revealed the scope of the problem, entire milk supplies were condemned and farms faced devastating losses. Families who had trusted dairy as essential nutrition suddenly questioned everything in their refrigerators. Regulators tightened controls on pesticide residues in animal feed, but the contamination had already spread through countless gallons consumed before anyone knew to test. It remains a stark reminder that toxins travel through food chains in ways nobody fully anticipates. Artificial butter flavoring popcorn filled movie theaters and home kitchens throughout the 1980s with that irresistible buttery aroma that made the snack feel indulgent and satisfying. The chemical responsible, diacetyl, created a flavor so convincing that microwave popcorn became a household staple, and the smell alone triggered cravings that sold millions of bags. Families gathered around televisions with steaming bowls, breathing in that rich butter scent without any suspicion that the aroma itself might be harmful. The convenience seemed perfect, a few minutes in the microwave delivering theater-quality popcorn right at home. But workers in popcorn factories began developing a devastating lung disease that doctors eventually traced to inhaling diacetyl vapors during production. The condition, nicknamed popcorn lung, caused irreversible damage that left workers struggling to breathe. When the connection became public, manufacturers reformulated their products and improved factory ventilation. Consumers who had innocently enjoyed that buttery smell suddenly realized the flavoring carried risks that extended far beyond the snack itself. Carrageenan infant formula nourished babies throughout the 1980s, the seaweed-derived thickener keeping liquid formulas smooth and consistent in ways parents appreciated. Manufacturers added it to prevent separation, improve texture, and create products that poured easily from bottles without clumping. Parents trusted these formulas completely, feeding them to infants whose developing systems depended entirely on whatever adults chose to provide. The ingredient seemed natural enough, derived from red seaweed used in food preparation for centuries. Nobody questioned whether something so traditional could pose any risk to the tiniest consumers. But research eventually raised concerns about carrageenan triggering inflammation in digestive systems, with potential implications for infant gut health that worried pediatricians and parents alike. Manufacturers began removing the additive from baby formulas, reformulating products to eliminate even theoretical risks to vulnerable newborns. Today, most infant formulas advertise their carrageenan-free status. Those old cans represent an era when assumptions about natural ingredients gave way to more careful scrutiny of everything entering infant bodies. Trans-fat hydrogenated shortenings were the secret behind flaky pie crusts, crispy fried foods, and packaged snacks that stayed fresh for months throughout the 1980s. Manufacturers loved partially hydrogenated oils because they extended shelf life, improved texture, and cost far less than butter or natural fats. Families baked with these shortenings, fried chicken in them, and consumed them in countless processed foods without any idea that something so common could be harmful. The creamy white blocks sat in pantries beside flour and sugar, treated as essential baking supplies. But trans fats proved devastating to cardiovascular health, raising bad cholesterol while lowering good cholesterol in ways that dramatically increased heart disease risk. Researchers connected these artificial fats to thousands of preventable deaths each year, making them one of the most dangerous ingredients ever allowed in the food supply. Regulators eventually moved to phase out trans fats entirely, forcing manufacturers to reformulate products unchanged for decades. The shortenings that once made baked goods irresistible now carry a legacy of health consequences that took far too long to recognize. BHA preserved snack foods kept chips, crackers, and cereals fresh throughout the 1980s. The antioxidant preventing fats from going rancid during the journey from factory to kitchen cabinet. Manufacturers added it to nearly every processed food, trusting that anything approved must be safe for daily consumption. Families tore open bags of chips, poured bowls of cereal, and munched on crackers without reading ingredient labels or questioning what kept these foods fresh so long. The convenience seemed like progress, food science solving the ancient problem of spoilage. But laboratory studies raised troubling questions when BHA was linked to tumor growth in animals, suggesting the additive might carry cancer risks warranting concern. Regulators in some countries restricted or banned BHA while others allowed it in foods, creating confusion about its true safety. Today, many health-conscious consumers actively avoid products containing BHA, choosing alternatives that preserve freshness without the controversial additive. Those familiar snack packages represent an era when convenience often trumped caution in decisions about what belonged in the food supply. Lead-glazed ceramic food containers arrived in American kitchens throughout the 1980s, imported from countries where manufacturing standards differed dramatically from domestic regulations. These colorful bowls, plates, and storage containers caught eyes with their vibrant designs and affordable prices, filling cupboards with pieces that seemed both decorative and practical. Families stored leftovers, served meals, and displayed fruit in containers they never suspected could be dangerous. The glazes looked beautiful, the ceramics felt sturdy, and nothing about their appearance suggested any hidden threat. But lead in ceramic glazes leaches into food, especially when contents are acidic, hot, or stored for extended periods. Families unknowingly poison themselves with every serving of tomato sauce, citrus juice, or pickled vegetables placed in these containers. When testing revealed dangerous lead levels in imported ceramics, regulators banned the most hazardous products and established stricter standards for anything touching food. The colorful dishes that once brightened kitchen shelves now serve as reminders that beauty can sometimes mask serious danger hiding just beneath the surface. Saffrole-flavored sassafras products gave root beer, candies, and herbal teas their distinctive taste throughout the 1980s, the natural compound extracted from the bark and roots of the sassafras tree. The flavor was unmistakable, earthy and sweet with a complexity that artificial flavorings struggled to replicate. Families drank traditional root beer, brewed sassafras tea, and enjoyed candies flavored with the extract without any suspicion that something so natural could pose serious health risks. The ingredient had been used for centuries, lending credibility to its presence in modern foods and beverages. But laboratory studies connected saffrole to liver cancer in animals, revealing that the compound could damage DNA and promote tumor growth. Regulators moved to ban saffrole from food and beverages, forcing manufacturers to reformulate products that had relied on the natural flavoring for generations. Today, commercial root beer uses artificial sassafras flavoring that mimics the taste without the cancer risk. Those old bottles and candy wrappers represent an era when natural did not automatically mean safe, and tradition could not protect against scientific discovery. Calamus-flavored bitters and tonics added a distinctive spicy sweetness to cocktails, digestive remedies, and herbal preparations throughout the 1980s. The root extract had been prized for centuries in traditional medicine and flavoring, lending complexity to drinks that bartenders and home mixologists crafted with pride. People sipped these bitters believing they aided digestion, settled stomachs, and provided medicinal benefits that justified their sharp, aromatic taste. The bottles sat behind bars and in medicine cabinets, their contents trusted as both flavorful and functional. But calamus contains a compound called beta-acerone, which researchers identified as a carcinogen capable of causing tumors in laboratory studies. When regulators examined the evidence, they banned calamus from food and beverage use entirely, removing an ingredient that had flavored drinks for generations. Bartenders reformulated classic recipes, and herbal remedy makers found alternatives that provided similar flavors without the cancer risk. Those old bottles of bitters now serve as reminders that even ingredients with centuries of traditional use can harbor dangers that only modern science could reveal. Driving home. Christmas trees on car roofs without tying them properly was almost a holiday sport in the 1970s. Families would buy a tree that was always 2 feet taller than the living room allowed, hoist it onto the roof by sheer force of will, and toss 1 or 2 loops of twine over it with a confidence that probably came from nowhere rational. The wind would whip through the branches as the car pulled onto the road, and everyone inside held their breath just a little, watching for any sudden wobble. Nobody thought about fines or traffic violations or the possibility of the tree tumbling dramatically into the street. It was just part of the adventure, part of the ritual of getting that perfect pine safely home. Today, though, even slightly unsecured loads can earn you a ticket on the spot. Highways and city streets have become strict zones of compliance, leaving no room for the messy charm of trial and error. But the memory of those rides home, filled with laughter and the smell of fresh pine creeping into the car, remains untouchable. Prepackaged luncheon meats were a post-war convenience that fit neatly into America's new rhythm. Busy days, quick lunches, no waste. Sliced, sealed, and ready to eat, these meats were the modern worker's dream. They filled sandwiches, lunchboxes, and picnic baskets across the nation. What no one realized was that heating them could trigger a dangerous reaction. The nitrates used to preserve their bright pink color produced nitrosamines, chemical compounds linked to cancer. Commercials showed happy families eating these sandwiches in spotless kitchens, while factories quietly churned out meats laced with preservatives no one could pronounce. It was the dawn of the convenience age, when speed and shelf life mattered more than nutrition. And like so many mid-century innovations, it took years before anyone asked what we were actually putting in our bodies. For years, people fried or broiled their sandwiches, unknowingly creating toxins right on their stovetops. Once scientists uncovered the truth, the industry was forced to reformulate, and entire brands vanished overnight. Luncheon meat never quite recovered its innocence. What was once a symbol of post-war efficiency became a reminder that convenience can carry a hidden cost. Crystal Pepsi was the drink that tried to reinvent soda and accidentally confused everyone. In the early 1990s, Pepsi wanted to symbolize purity and transparency, so they made a cola with no color at all. It looked like sparkling water but tasted like Pepsi, and that contradiction fascinated people. People stared at it on shelves, unsure if it was a prank or a promise, and yet curiosity always won. For a brief moment, it felt like drinking the future, a crystal-clear revolution in a brown-colored world. Even opening the bottle had a sense of wonder, like unveiling a secret that was hiding in plain sight. For a short while, it became a phenomenon. Commercials promised a clean, futuristic world in a clear bottle. But the illusion shattered quickly. Many consumers thought it was diet soda, while others complained that it tasted off, even though the formula was almost identical. Mislabeling, marketing confusion, and failed freshness tests in certain regions sealed its fate. It vanished almost as quickly as it appeared. Still, for those who remember it, Crystal Pepsi was unforgettable, not for its flavor, but for its ambition. It was a reminder that sometimes, when you try too hard to make something clear, you end up losing what made it real. Paraformaldehyde closet deodorizers were once the hidden secret to keeping a home smelling fresh, tucked into closets and drawers like quiet guardians of cleanliness. Grandparents hung them beside winter coats, wool sweaters, and blankets, trusting that these little blocks would keep everything smelling crisp and free of musty odors. People believed they were doing something good for their clothes, protecting them from moisture and mildew during long storage seasons. But paraformaldehyde did not just freshen the air. It released fumes that were irritating to the eyes and lungs, creating an invisible cloud inside small enclosed spaces. Every time someone opened the closet door, they breathed in vapors known to cause headaches, coughing, and long-term respiratory issues. These deodorizers were eventually banned, and families were urged to switch to safer alternatives. Today, these closet blocks serve as a reminder that a pleasant scent is not always a sign of safety. Patriotism was mandatory in the 1970s classroom. Every morning began with the Pledge of Allegiance, and refusing to stand was seen as an act of defiance. Students who stayed seated or silent could face detention, suspension, or even expulsion. It was less about love of country and more about enforcing obedience. Some kids quietly mouthed the words to avoid punishment, while others looked down at their desks, hearts pounding in defiance they could not voice. A few brave ones refused entirely, sparking whispers, outrage, or even calls to their parents. Those moments turned a daily routine into a test of loyalty no child should have had to face. Teachers were expected to report disrespectful students, and principals treated it like insubordination. Few questioned whether forcing loyalty was loyalty at all. Many children recited the words automatically, their voices blending into a rhythm they never truly thought about. Decades later, the idea of punishing someone for silent protest feels completely un-American, yet that was the daily reality. The 1970s may have looked free and expressive on the surface, but inside the classroom, conformity was law. The He-Man power sword turned every backyard into a battlefield. Inspired by the cartoon hero himself, the hard plastic sword was big, bright, and built for action. Every child who held it shouted, "I have the power!" usually before whacking a sibling or neighbor. There was a kind of magic in that sword, especially when paired with the He-Man action figures in Saturday morning reruns. Kids wore makeshift capes made from bath towels and staged epic battles in the yard, believing they were saving the universe. Of course, those heroic duels often ended with someone crying, a broken toy, and a lecture from an exhausted parent. The sword's tough design meant it could take a beating, but that also meant it delivered one. Black eyes, bruised arms, and a few broken lamps later, parents started realizing this toy might have been too realistic. The problem was not just the sword, it was the energy it unleashed in every kid who wielded it. The toy was eventually reworked with softer plastic, but by then, countless kids had already discovered their inner warrior and their parents' limits for patience. It remains one of the most iconic but dangerous toy weapons of the decade, symbolizing both the imagination and chaos that defined 1980s playtime. Formaldehyde-treated artificial garlands were draped across mantels, staircases, and doorways in nearly every 1980s home, their lush green appearance lasting season after season without wilting. Families loved how realistic they looked compared to older plastic versions, and the convenience of never replacing them made the investment worthwhile. Parents wrapped them around banisters while children helped secure them with ribbons, everyone breathing in that faint chemical smell nobody questioned. The garlands held their shape because manufacturers treated them with formaldehyde, a preservative that slowly released invisible fumes throughout the holiday season. Every time someone walked past or adjusted a draped section, more chemical escaped into living spaces where families gathered. Children sleeping near decorated doorways breathed the vapors all night without anyone realizing the exposure was happening. When researchers connected formaldehyde off-gassing to respiratory irritation and long-term concerns, regulations forced manufacturers to find safer methods. The garlands that once seemed like smart investments became reminders of how convenience can mask invisible dangers. Neighborhood gift swaps with homemade alcohol were common during the 1970s, especially among adults who loved giving bottles of homemade wine, spiced rum, or boozy eggnog. It was a heartfelt gesture, something made with time and care that carried the spirit of the season. People laughed as they compared recipes, shared bottles after dinner, or kept them for Christmas Eve gatherings. Every bottle told a story of family traditions, of trial and error, of batches that turned out perfect and batches that definitely did not. Sharing it felt like sharing a piece of your home, and receiving it felt like being invited into someone else's. No one worried about licensing or alcohol regulations. It was community, plain and simple. Today, though, giving or trading unlicensed alcohol is illegal in many states. The law sees risk where people once saw generosity, but for those who lived it, those clinking bottles remain part of Christmas memory, warm and unmistakably human. Asbestos oven mitts and hot pads were marketed as indestructible. Advertisements promised they could handle any heat without ever catching fire. Housewives trusted them, pulling casseroles and roasts straight from the oven with confidence. It was the post-war era of atomic age optimism, when scientific materials meant progress and danger felt impossible. The word asbestos was said with pride. It sounded technical, modern, and safe. Nobody imagined that the same mineral used in insulation and factories could turn a kitchen into a slow-motion health hazard. The secret was asbestos, a mineral that could resist flames but released deadly fibers every time it was touched. Each squeeze, each fold, released invisible dust into the air. Over time, those fibers lodged deep in the lungs, leading to mesothelioma and other fatal illnesses decades later. The danger was silent and patient, hiding behind the promise of safety. By the time the truth came out, many who used them daily were already sick. Asbestos was once hailed as the perfect material for modern living. It ended up becoming one of history's most infamous killers. Those oven mitts, sold with warmth and trust, literally took people's breath away. In 2009, Nestlé Toll House cookie dough, something nearly every American household trusted, became the center of a national panic. For decades, people could not resist sneaking a spoonful straight from the mixing bowl. It was childhood rebellion in its sweetest form, a taste of doughy, buttery comfort. But that year, hospitals began linking a mysterious wave of E. coli infections to unbaked Toll House dough. Investigators traced the bacteria to contaminated flour and eggs, something no one ever thought twice about. The news spread fast, and families across the country threw away tubs of dough from their refrigerators. It was a moment of disbelief. How could something so innocent, so normal, become dangerous? The recall changed food laws forever. New reformulation rules required pasteurization and clear warnings against eating raw dough, ending an era of guilty pleasure. Nestlé later reintroduced a safer version, but it never quite felt the same. People began to bake their cookies all the way through, no longer daring to take that secret taste. Still, the memory of licking the spoon while baking with family lingers for millions, a reminder that nostalgia often hides in the smallest, simplest moments. And sometimes those moments vanish overnight, not because we outgrow them, but because safety finally caught up to sweetness. Bare bulb heat lamps for bathrooms were once seen as a luxurious upgrade, offering instant warmth during cold mornings when stepping out of the shower felt unbearable. Grandparents installed them proudly, believing these lamps were both comforting and practical, especially in older homes without central heating. The bright red bulbs glowed intensely, filling the bathroom with a warmth that felt almost spa-like. People trusted them completely, flicking the switch every morning without considering any risk beyond the heat itself. But bare bulbs are fragile, and these lamps were often placed dangerously close to moisture. If water splashed onto the hot surface, the bulb could shatter violently, sending glass shards across the bathroom. Worse, the exposed wiring and intense heat created real fire hazards in rooms filled with towels, curtains, and wooden cabinets. When safety investigators documented the number of injuries in home fires, regulators banned these lamps and required protective coverings for any bathroom heating fixtures. Families who once saw these bulbs as a luxury suddenly realized how hazardous they truly were. Today, modern heating systems and safer bulb designs have replaced those old fixtures. But the memory of that glowing red light still lingers in many households. It is unsettling to think that something meant to bring comfort carried such unpredictable risks behind its warm glow. Discipline in the 1970s could take strange and terrifying forms, and one of the harshest was the principal's office lock-in. When students misbehaved or needed to cool down, some principals would place them in small storage rooms or supply closets, alone, in silence, sometimes in the dark. There were no cameras, no supervision, just fear. The student might stay there for minutes or hours depending on the mood of the principal. Teachers and parents rarely questioned it because they trusted authority. The sound of the door shutting was unforgettable, a heavy click that meant you were completely alone. The air smelled of cleaning supplies and dust, and the longer you sat there, the smaller the room felt. Every creak outside the door made your heart race, wondering if someone was coming back or if they had forgotten you entirely. To the staff, it was a practical way to maintain control. To the kids, it was punishment through isolation. Many remember sitting on the cold floor, hearing the muffled sound of typewriters and voices outside, wondering when someone would come back. For a child, that kind of solitude could feel endless. It is hard to imagine any educator defending that now, yet at the time it was accepted as normal discipline. What adults once called cooling off looks more like psychological cruelty in hindsight. Aquadots were a toy that promised endless creativity with just a few drops of water, but they became infamous for an entirely different reason. The tiny, colorful beads could be arranged into shapes and designs, and when sprayed with water, they stuck together magically. Kids loved how simple and satisfying it was. Many children turned their kitchen tables into art studios, proudly crafting hearts, stars, and animals that shimmered like candy. The bright colors and glossy texture made them irresistible, even to toddlers who were too young to play safely. Parents praised the toys' creativity at first, never imagining that the harmless beads could turn into something so dangerous. But soon after their release, reports emerged that children were falling sick after swallowing the beads. Tests revealed that the coating contained a compound that turned toxic inside the body, producing a chemical similar to a date rape drug. Panic spread quickly among parents, and the product was pulled from store shelves worldwide. For many families, it was a wake-up call about how even the most innocent-looking toy could hide a sinister danger. The recall was massive, and Aquadots became a symbol of the dark side of 1980s-style creativity, colorful, exciting, and completely reckless. What was meant to be an art toy ended up in the history books as one of the most shocking product failures of the decade. PVC blow-mold yard figures with toxic plasticizers stood proudly on lawns throughout the 1980s, their cheerful Santas and snowmen glowing from internal bulbs that made neighborhoods feel magical after dark. Families collected them over years, adding new figures each season until entire yards became illuminated winter wonderlands. Children loved running between them, touching their smooth plastic surfaces and peering inside at the warm orange glow of incandescent bulbs. These figures were made from polyvinyl chloride softened with plasticizers that made the material flexible enough to mold into complex shapes. Under summer storage heat and winter bulb warmth, those plasticizers slowly migrated to the surface and released fumes that drifted across yards where families gathered. The chemicals responsible for making the plastic pliable were later linked to hormone disruption, especially troubling for children who spent hours playing near the glowing figures. When regulations tightened around these compounds, manufacturers scrambled to reformulate. The beloved yard decorations that defined neighborhood holiday spirit became symbols of an era that prioritized appearance over safety. Community bonfires using unregulated materials were another festive tradition that belonged to a different world entirely. You would see families tossing in scraps of old fencing, broken furniture, untreated wood, and sometimes even boxes or paper left over from the holiday madness. The bonfire would roar to life, sending sparks spiraling into the winter air like fireflies trying to escape the heat. People gathered around with warm drinks, shared stories, and treated it as a way to come together when the weather tried to push everyone apart. Nobody checked whether the materials were safe to burn. Nobody asked about air quality. It was simply a tradition born from practicality and a desire to be together. Today, though, burning anything other than clean, approved wood is illegal. Environmental regulations forbid the release of toxic fumes, and burning household materials can result in fines or even legal action. It is a reminder that the world has grown more cautious and more regulated. But the memory of standing around a roaring fire, bundled up and laughing with neighbors, is something no law can erase. The Easy Bake Oven of the 1980s felt like pure independence in a box. With a tiny light bulb acting as the heat source, kids could bake small cakes and cookies all by themselves. It was marketed as a way to feel grown up, and it worked, maybe too well. Many kids used the oven to experiment, tossing in candy bars, crayons, or whatever was in the pantry just to see what would happen. The smell that filled the room was equal parts sugar and smoke, and parents would come running only to find melted chaos inside. Some kids even charged friends a few cents to taste test their creations, proudly serving up burned chocolate and half-cooked dough. The problem was those little ovens could get dangerously hot. Thousands of children burned their fingers or hands trying to pull out the metal pans, and some even ended up with serious blisters. There were no automatic shutoffs, and the compact design trapped heat in ways no one expected. Parents quickly realized the toy was more hazard than hobby. Later versions introduced safety doors and cooler heating elements, but by then, the damage to its reputation was done. The 1980s model still holds a nostalgic place in many hearts, but it also taught an entire generation a hard lesson. Sometimes being just like mom comes with a price. Butter-flavored margarine was a 1950s wonder, spreadable, cheap, and promoted as a heart-healthy alternative to butter. Housewives embraced it as the modern choice, the sign of progress in every kitchen. Its golden color and smooth texture promised indulgence without guilt. It was advertised in bright magazines beside smiling families and spotless kitchens, the perfect picture of American prosperity. Scientists and companies alike told the public it was the smarter fat, a scientific marvel that separated them from the old-fashioned ways of their parents. But science back then cared more about selling innovation than testing its safety. The secret behind its miracle formula was trans fats, the industrial oils hydrogenated to stay solid at room temperature. For decades, Americans slathered their toast and fried their eggs in it, believing they were doing their hearts a favor. Then the studies came, and the truth was hard to swallow. Trans fats were worse than the butter they replaced, clogging arteries and shortening lives. By the time it was banned, it had already shaped the diet of a generation. Butter-flavored margarine was more than a product. It was a lie sold with a smile. Before there was a health craze about energy drinks, there were sodas laced with brominated vegetable oil, better known as BVO. Found in citrus favorites like Mountain Dew and Sundrop, it was used to keep the flavor evenly mixed. For decades, nobody questioned it. Kids chugged neon green sodas at arcades, parents packed them into lunchboxes, and commercials promised unstoppable energy. It was the soda of summer vacations, backyard barbecues, and glowing green tongues. People had no idea that the same ingredient keeping the citrus oil afloat was slowly building up in their bodies over time. Then scientists revealed that bromine, one of the elements in BVO, could build up in the human body and cause serious health problems. Suddenly, the familiar fizz turned into fear. The Food and Drug Administration banned its use, forcing companies to change their recipes. But for people who grew up in the 80s and 90s, that old taste still lingers in memory. It was sharp, tangy, and just a bit radioactive in color, like drinking liquid lightning from a bottle. It was the flavor of youth, risk, and everything that felt a little too extreme for its own good. Cadmium-plated dishware once sat proudly on dinner tables across the nation, decorated with bright reds, yellows, and oranges that made every meal feel a little more cheerful. Grandparents loved these plates because they were sturdy, vibrant, and sold everywhere from department stores to small local shops. Families used them daily for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, never imagining that something so colorful could carry such a serious threat. Back then, bright colors meant quality and charm, not danger, but cadmium does not stay locked inside ceramic glaze. Over time, especially when exposed to acids from food, the metal can leach out and seep directly into whatever is being eaten. Researchers eventually discovered that cadmium exposure could damage kidneys, weaken bones, and cause long-term health issues, even at low levels. This revelation shocked families who had relied on these plates for years. Regulators quickly moved to ban cadmium in dishware, forcing manufacturers to overhaul their production methods. Many people packed away their old sets, uncertain whether it was safe to keep them even as decorations. The contrast between the cheerful appearance and the hidden danger made these dishes one of the more unsettling household discoveries of the era today. They serve as a reminder that beauty and safety do not always go hand in hand, especially in a time when fewer regulations existed to protect everyday families. After the final bell in the 1970s, students did not always go home. Many schools expected them to stay behind to clean the classrooms, sweeping floors, wiping chalkboards, emptying trash bins, and straightening desks. It was not considered community service. It was simply part of being a student. Teachers handed out chores like they handed out homework, and compliance was not optional. Some schools even assigned rotating duty charts, so every child eventually spent their turn as a makeshift janitor. Parents rarely complained. It builds character, they were told. For the schools, it was a way to save money and instill discipline. But for the kids, it was unpaid labor disguised as a lesson in responsibility. Students often finished these tasks long after classes ended, tired and hungry, their hands coated in chalk dust. There were no gloves, no cleaning supplies meant for children, just a rag and a bucket. Yet there was also a strange pride attached to it. The clean boards and polished desks became quiet proof of diligence. Still, looking back, it is unsettling to think how normalized it was to rely on children to maintain the school environment. Today, janitorial work is protected and professional, but back then it was just another rule no one questioned. The line between discipline and exploitation was thin, and for many kids it was scrubbed away along with the floors they were told to clean. Magnetic building sets were the kind of toy that made kids feel like engineers. With tiny magnets inside colorful rods and metal balls, you could build towers, bridges, and geometric shapes that defied gravity. The concept was brilliant, until those tiny magnets started falling out. When swallowed, multiple magnets could attract inside the intestines, pinching and tearing through tissue. Doctors called the injuries horrific, and emergency surgeries skyrocketed. Parents who once saw the sets as educational now viewed them as silent threats. Eventually, stricter safety standards forced toy companies to redesign magnetic parts completely, sealing them away from small hands. Even so, these sets remain infamous reminders that some of the most fascinating toys also carried hidden dangers. They captured the 1980s perfectly, creative, intelligent, and just a little too risky for comfort. Lead-soldered stained glass tree toppers crowned Christmas trees in the 1980s with handcrafted elegance that mass-produced plastic stars could never match. Families treasured these delicate pieces, often receiving them as wedding gifts or inheriting them from grandparents who valued artisan craftsmanship. The colored glass caught tree lights beautifully, casting rainbow patterns across ceilings and walls while everyone gathered below to exchange presents. What made these toppers so structurally sound was the lead solder holding each piece of glass together, applied by craftspeople who worked without gloves or ventilation. Every time someone placed the topper on the tree, adjusted its position, or packed it away, tiny particles of lead transferred onto hands that later touched faces and food. Children lifted onto shoulders to place the star were exposed directly, their small fingers gripping the metal seams without anyone imagining the danger. When health authorities documented lead's devastating effects on developing brains, these handcrafted treasures became hazardous heirlooms. The artistry that once elevated holiday decorating now carries warnings about handling and display. Selling homemade holiday baked goods without permits was a simple way to share joy and earn a little cash in the 1970s. Families made fudge, fruitcake, cookies, and sweetbreads in their home kitchens, wrapping them in foil or wax paper and selling them to neighbors, teachers, or church members. No one asked for licenses or health inspections. People trusted the hands that baked the food, not the paperwork behind it. There was pride in every recipe, many passed down through generations and guarded like treasure. And buyers felt like they were supporting friends, not just buying dessert. People trusted each other. The taste of a neighbor's homemade treat felt like a connection, not a risk. Today, though, food handling laws make this illegal without proper certification. Kitchens must be inspected, ingredients documented, and packaging regulated. Something warm and human was lost in that shift, but the memory of receiving those imperfect, lovingly made treats still brings comfort every holiday season. Before you go, tell us which toxic 80s food shocked you the most. Tap like if this walk through forgotten dangers hit home, and subscribe so you never miss the next deep dive into the foods we thought were safe.